All right. Let's get it. I'm Julius Bailey. You should be ready to get these few weeks over, get you a good grade and some good credits in. Good conversation around Black film and Black filmic representation. I'm Julius Bailey. As I mentioned in your email, feel free to email me or call me if you have any questions or want to go over some material. Um, this is the first of 2 lectures I'll do each week, so there'll be at least 8 lectures from me. There'll also be some other videos that I may have already done or certainly have you listen to by somebody else, as well as the films that we'll be watching. All right. So I just kind of wanted to do a kind of a opening kind of thing for you. So make sure if you're watching this now and just looking, just kind of make sure you get your notebook or something like that to get started. I think that what's going to be important is to talk about certain terms that this lecture is going to touch. Representation, stereotypes, caricatures, blackface, counter image, interior life. Okay? So I'm going to give you a list of questions that I want you to answer relative to this lecture. I'll put that in your Moodle, but there'll be core questions like that'll come from this lecture. But how can image becomes resist? I don't know what. I'll write that down. I want you to kind of focus in on the lecture right now. So, hello everybody. Welcome. Make sure your notebooks are out, because we're not gonna watch black film the way that people normally watch movies this semester or this summer, right? We're not just gonna ask, did I like the movie, right? Was it a slow film? Was the acting good or not? Did I like or understand the ending, right? I'm not going to ask you stuff like that, right? They're cool questions to talk about, with your friends or, on the couch or something, but they're not enough for this class. For this class, the screen is evidence. The screen is argument, right? The screen is both classroom and courtroom. The screen is a stage and a pulpit. The screen is a dinner table. And the screen is somewhat of like a protest sign, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes, Lord help us, the screen can be an expensive lie, millions of dollar lie with a soundtrack that makes you dance. Let me begin with this. Film did not enter American life innocently. It wasn't an innocent toy. Yes, it was technology, but it wasn't just technology of power, right? It controls more than entertainment, right? Television, films control the public image. It decides who looks dangerous, who looks beautiful, who looks lazy. But the TV screen, the movies decides who looks desirable, who looks intelligent or disposable, or even who looks like they belong somewhere down the line in the future, right? That's why representation matters. A representation is not simply showing somebody on the screen. It's the making of meaning through image, right? Watch that. It's the making of meaning through image. The camera says, look here. The editing says, feel this way. The music says, trust this person or don't trust this person or fear this person or laugh at this person, right? And before you even know it, your emotions have been recruited by the screen. So the screen can lie, and the screen can teach you to lie, right? I mean, early American film helped taught audiences how to missee black folk, how to misrepresent black folk, not merely just to not see you, but to missee you, if you will. There's a difference. Not just to ignore you, being invisible. That's one problem. But being seen through a lie, through a lens of racism or patriarchy is different. If you're invisible, people refuse to look at you. If you're seen through a lie, they look or think, they look and see something that they think they understand, but it was through the lie. Why? Because the lie now becomes familiar. It becomes common sense. It becomes the background music of the nation. And this is where somebody like Donald Bogle, right? We're going to read his book. His book is in here, but he's a book called Tom Coon's Mulattoes and Mammies and books, right? So I think all of them, right? But they're just not just mere vocabulary words, right? As you could just talk to people about, right? But they are important tropes, a map of what Hollywood historically tried to do with Black folk and Black humanity, right? Hollywood had a problem, right? Hollywood had to deal with the existence of Black folk for real, with the existence of Black labor, right? Black culture, right? What white supremacy does, it keeps Black folk below the line of full humanity. So Black film gives the nation a lie, a mask, the loyal servant, the comic fool, the tragic mulatto, right? The mixed race woman, right? The threatening big Black man, the endlessly caring Black woman whose own family embodies they're gone somehow while she raises somebody else's child or children, right? So now, one of the tricks of stereotypes is that they appear simple. That's part of the power of stereotypes. They say to the audience, hey, relax, chill. You don't have to think. You already know this person. You've seen this person before. A stereotype is like a shortcut around the humanity of somebody else, right? A shortcut arrives before even curiosity comes. A stereotype arrives before the history of somebody. A stereotype arrives before the question, who is this person in front of me? Who is this person when they're not performing, right? That's why I want you in this class to think about the term interior life this week in class, right? The interior life. That means the character has thoughts and contradictions, right? Not a flat character, right? But they have memory, they have fear, right? They have imagination and they have desires, right? And they have a life even beyond the usefulness in the screen to somebody else's story, right? A stereotype steals that from them, right? Interiority, right? It makes the character useful but not whole, right? Imagine if every time people saw you, they only saw one thing: how you are useful. You're an athlete. You're a loud kid. You're a Black girl. You're a rich kid. You're a blonde. You're a pretty girl. You're an angry. You think you're a joke. You're a clown. Right? Somehow, are you a teacher's pet, right? All those type of labels, all those labels they might contain a small piece of reality, but they become violent when it replaces, right, the totality of you. Now multiply that times all the blondes, all the athletes, all the Black folk, all the brunettes. That's what early American film did with Black folk. It took racial fantasy and gave emotion to it. It made racism move across the screen and call itself entertainment, right? Let's talk about blackface for a minute, right? Blackface. Blackface is not just makeup, not just putting on the charcoal, right? But it's a performance system, right? I'll lecture about it a little bit more later. But it's about putting on a false blackness so that Black people can be laughable. Imagine that. So they can be laughable, ugly, childish, dangerous. It allowed white performers to entertain to entertain others on Black authority without having to deal with Black realities or Black complexity. And because Blackface reaches people emotionally, Blackface helps it teaches what the body It teaches about the black body before it teaches about the black mind, right? Whew. There's a reason, y'all, that I want us to slow down in this class. Students often say, well, Dr. Bailey, that was back in the day, right? Yeah, historically it was back then, right? But the question is not whether the exact old image still exists and shown today, right? The question really is whether the logic survived throughout the century. The old character may not wear the same clothes, but it still may be doing the same job. That's what Spike Lee says about Tyler Perry. The mammy becomes the endlessly selfless caregiver. The Uncle Tom becomes a black character that proves his guilt, his value by laughing at other black people, right? Right. You make money off seeing black bodies as being ultra violent, right? Black comedy as a sidekick, right? The magical Negro we'll talk about later, right? That stereotype, the black helper that appears in the movie to help somebody else and then exits without a life of his own, right? 21st century is a new outfit, may create new outfits with the old job, right? So we want these 5 weeks not to be too lazy. A lazy analysis would be, oh, there's some black folk in the film, so we good. And we're not always gonna be good, right? Just being present doesn't mean powerful, right? Just being visible doesn't mean you're free, right? Just because you're a black face on a screen don't mean you should carry a white fantasy, right? Because they do, right? A black voice might serve someone else's comfort and not the comfort of his family or his children, right? That's what blackface represents. Right? That's what black stereotypes are dangerous. So the question in this class is not simply, are black people in the film? The question is, what are the black folk doing in the film? And what is the film doing with black life? Right? Let me give you a hip hop connection. Hip hop has always understood the politics of naming. Right? Think about what it means for an MC to grab the mic and say, this is who I am, right? This is where I'm from, right? This is what they said about us, and this is what I am saying back to them, right? Before the even verse starts, right, the rapper is claiming presence. As old rapper Mr. Mystical, here I go, right? The counter image is a response track to what they thought they said. I am whatever you say I am, and if I wasn't, then why would I say I am? I'm responding against that type of exteriority placed upon my interiority, right? This film is about this class is about interiority, right? And that brings us to sort of somebody like Oscar Micheaux. Now we're going to talk about Oscar Micheaux, which is the first really black filmmaker, right? He wasn't just creating films. He was making films in the shadow of movies like Birth of a Nation, which is one of the most famous and harmful films in American history that people like Donald Trump and others might say is a great film in the history of America. You know, what Birth of a Nation did, it organized the whole nation, the whole story around white victimhood. Right? It turned reconstruction, right? That made a white terrorism upon black folk look like black rescue, right? That's what that did, right? That's not just bad representation. That's moral propaganda that with a class like Julius Bailey, we're going to have to deal with. Remember, I'm the teacher that Fox News warned you about, right? This ain't no perfect world, right? That's too easy, right? And just having a black film by a black filmmaker doesn't make it that good. So people like Oscar Michaud at the early part of the 20th century showed in which how class tensions, how violence, how aspirations, and vulnerability like that is a part of the complexity of black life, right? So I'm giving you that to watch as a part of this class, right? So you'll see a Sylvia Landry in the movie, right? She has purpose, right? She has movement, right? And she's involved in education, survival, and uplift and memory, right? So when you watch that, I want you to see how she stands in contrast to old flat images. Not fat, flat, right? Static, right? Myopic, right? One-eyed, right? I want you to pay attention in that film and others about education in this film. It's not just allow me to get my degree so I can get up out of here and get a better job. Although I'm certainly certain for you and I'm happy for you to get your degree in this school, but if you watch some of these films, you're going to see how education is communal. It's tied to the future and the survival of black folk. It's often tied to the question of whether black people will be able to narrate themselves. You know, I think to educate a child historically is to challenge the lie that the child was born to be criminal, born to be foolish, or born to be silenced. So we need to treat the classroom as a counter image, school as a refusal, as we pay attention to the psychic violence upon black folk, right? And movies and cinema attempted to make white violence disappear. And then you got people like Oscar Michaud that say, no, we're going to make it visible. And when we see white violence become visible, the moral structure changes. It's not just why are black people struggling. The question really becomes what's going on in America, and what is America refusing to remember? Right, that shift is crucial. That's what Eddie Glaude is talking about now. Right, that's a whole other conversation. But you can't blame folk for the conditions that they're inherited, right, without telling the truth about the forces that create the conditions, right? So let me pause for a minute and let me say something about how you watch old films, right? So, you're going to watch a movie like Within Our Gates, and you might say, man, this is an old movie. Yeah, it is old. And we're going to watch that, and it ain't done in Dolby 5.0 and all that kind of stuff. The camera language is going to be different with that particular field. The acting style is going to be different. The grammar of the film is going to be different. But don't confuse old technique with weak thought. Just like great-great-great-grandma, she was smart too, even though she didn't go to college, right? So some of the old ones we watch, if we watch some of the new ones, is going to be asking the question, who gets educated? Who gets remembered? Who gets turned into a sort of a thread that is not a thread that is human? That ain't old. That's today. So when you answer the questions this week, don't give me a plot summary. I've seen the films, right? Plot summaries are where analysis goes to sleep, right? I want you to be awake for these 6 weeks, 5 weeks. If I ask you, what does it mean that the screen learned to lie? I need you to identify the lies, show how the lies are repeated, and explain what the lie protected. If I was to ask you why a stereotype is more dangerous than an insult, don't simply give me a Google response like they hurt people's feelings. Come on, man, go different, go deeper. A stereotype does something very specific, right? It teaches something, right? It steals what? Interiority, right? Right. I'm going to ask you, how can a film image resist, right? I want you to think about the camera as a site of struggle. Resistance doesn't always mean a fight. It doesn't always mean a march. Sometimes it begins with a different image, right? A Black woman who is center in a story. A Black school that's treated not just as some hood school that Joe Clark gotta put, but it becomes central to the community. Black aspirations, not as comedy, not as we move it on up. No. Some of this Black film is resistance even before the chants, even before the hashtags. So let me kind of close this first lecture like this. Black film begins with a fight over humanity. It's not just entertainment. It's not just industry. It's not just art. It's a fight over human. Can Black folk be seen as whole beings? Can Black people be understood? Can their laughter be understood as intelligence? Can anger be recognized as knowledge? Right? Can I have Black ambition and be legitimate and not, Don Quixote like? Right? Can Black life be shown sort of from within and not watched from above? And that's why I think this course matters. Because every time you watch a Black film, you are watching a theory of humanity about Black folk. And sometimes the theories are ugly. And sometimes the theories are beautiful. And sometimes the theories are confused. And sometimes it's trying to sell you something. Your job is to pay attention. Your job is to notice. And I'm going to give you some film this week that's going to ask you to watch for the lie. But don't stop there. Watch for the moments where Black film looks back and says, nah, bruh. Nah, sis. That ain't who we are. And that ain't the whole story, right? That makes sense? So before I close this for real, let me show you how to carry this into the work, right? So when you watch the film Within Our Gates, right, that I'm going to ask you to look at, I want you to keep a notebook, right? On one side, I want you to write something like, what is the lie? And then next to the lie, I want you to write, what is the answer? Right? What is the lie? It might be an old stereotype, an old assumption about Black folk or Black activity, some Black claim about sexuality or something like that, right? Some refusal to see themselves, right? That kind of thing, right? But then you have the other side, the answer, right? What was the gesture? What was the image that refuses the lie? Especially this early film. If you can do it that way, it'll keep you from summarizing. Summarize is going to tell me what happened. I know what happened. I want you to analyze. It shows what this scene, what's the tension. Also, pay attention to silence, right? Silent film is not silent in the way that we think it is. It's full of visuals. It's full of responses. What is the face saying? What is the body positioning doing? Right? How does the editing cut from one scene to another, right? How's meaning being framed, right? What happens when crowds gather, right? I hope you can get this, right? And I hate the fact that this course is I hate it, but, we're not together. But don't say, at least in this one film, that there's not much dialogue, so there's not much to say. No. That's like listening to a beat in music and saying ain't nothing happened because ain't nobody rap yet. The beat is already doing some work. Pay attention to the beat, right? When you think about being seen through a lie, I'm telling you right now, don't run to an easy answer, right? Lies are dangerous, and how we respond to a lie can be dangerous, right? Invisibility says you're not there. The lie says you are there, but only as I define you, right? So the movie Within Our Gates that I'm going to have you look at, it makes you think about why Black filmmakers have had to answer both. And Oscar Micheaux had to make Black life visible, but also I think visible against certain distortions that already been there, right? And finally, don't be afraid to say that old film was powerful and old. That ain't disrespectful. That's real, right? That's interpretation, right? Or what matters is whether you can explain the difference between a dated technique or an old school way of looking at something and a living question that still exists today. The film this week may be different, don't get me wrong, but it's going to raise some questions about violence and education and gender and sexuality and racial terror and things like that. And all that ain't just for history. It's still walking with us today in my generation and in your generation, right? Think about as you watch this film, every time you see a Black person in this film inside some institution, what is it saying? A court is not just a court. A school is not just a school. A church is not just a church. A home or a street is not just a work. What is it trying to say? Make the argument. All these scenes carry power, right? Early Black film often had to show these spaces, right? Because the space tells us what the characters are up against, right? If you only watch the person, you'll miss the structure of the space, right? And if you only watch the structure, you'll miss the person. The work is to hold both together, right? That's how you write. That's how you read Black film. That's how you do a course like mine. And that's how you treat racism, especially in early Black film, in the way that I need you to do it. All right? God bless you, man. Y'all take care. If you have any questions, give me a call. Take care. Stay strong.